I know what you're thinking. Aren't you basically in seclusion for all of your videos? Yes, but I am not usually going into seclusion to hone my Chinese brush painting skills. Every single time I've gone to an art museum in the past and they've had a Chinese brush painting or Japanese woodblock print exhibit, I have always just absolutely loved them and thought, I want to learn to do that at some point in my life. Today is that day, my friends. If you have something that you have always wanted to learn, whether it be in the art and crafting space or outside of it, maybe you need to brush up on your math skills, I don't know. If you want to try and do it along with me in this video, please do. To start off, we are hitting the books. We need to know the rules before we can break them, which we surely will be in this video. I took out 4 different Chinese brush painting books from the library. I just searched on my library's catalog and found 4 that I thought looked the most enticing. This one says Expert In-Depth Instruction for Serious Students of the Soft Martial Art. This book is dedicated to people who want to try something new and keep something old alive. This video is also dedicated to those people. After I had really spent most of the day absorbing all of that information, we have to start setting up our workspace. So brush painting is done with what are called the 4 treasures, which are the brush, the inkstone, the ink stick, and paper. There was actually a section in a couple of the books for how to set up a traditional Chinese brush painting workspace. So I'm going to model everything after that as much as possible. I don't quite have the same materials because it's quite expensive. I'm saving my budget for the next miniature project that I already bought something for. But as always on this channel, we're just going to do our best with what we already have. The challenging thing about brush painting is that it is closely related to calligraphy. So the method of holding the brush is really different. It's a super vertical hold, and you don't touch any part of your arm down to the table unless you're doing really small details. You really use the movement of your arm to create your lines. So I decided to start day 1 using only black ink, or in this case watercolor, and work our way out from there. There are generally 2 common types of brush painting, 写意, which is a very freehand impressionist version of painting subject matter, usually uses 模具, which is the boneless style, so it doesn't have any outlines. It's very expressive as well and just uses the qualities of the brush to create more of the feeling of the subject. And there's also 工笔, which is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum in that it's a little bit more realistic and trying to depict a subject more true to life. There are 3 subjects that are considered the most important in Chinese brush painting. The first one is landscapes, the second one is flowers and birds, and the third is people and characters. This was actually really nice for me because you all know I love painting nature.
Well, to be honest, I'm a nature freak.
Maybe that's why I love brush painting so much, I don't know. Now I'm just gonna say right now, my brush hold will likely deteriorate throughout the week. It was very hard to adjust, but I think when you do something like that, it really unlocks a new understanding of different ways of painting that I can take into even my normal acrylic painting. Then I went to try some different rock methods. There's kind of the more wet rock method, and then there's also a more textured, dry brushing technique, which is called axe cut strokes. So I wanted to jump into a small attempt at a landscape, experimenting with different rocks, different trees, kind of trying to bring everything together and balance the page as well as I could. And here is our bounty for the first day. It's not excellent, but honestly, it's way better than I thought it would be at the start, so welcome to day 2. Yesterday I worked only with black. I'm gonna start with that again today, and then I'm gonna start working in color a little bit. I am having a lot of fun with it. So let's get painting. Another really hard element about brush painting is that you simply have to go for it. There's no drawing out anything in advance. It's really just you and the wide open blank page before you.
Should I try to paint an animal? I feel like that's where it's gonna go wrong, but...
So I'm going to attempt to paint a rabbit. This was very tricky because, to be totally honest, I don't even draw animals that often, which is maybe odd because animals are one of my favorite things on this planet, which is exactly why our last Patreon project challenge was creatures and critters. In brush painting, you always group things in odd numbers. So like this little gaggle of trees, we've got 3 grouped together. Brush painting really values asymmetry. Now that's generally a guideline for composition, but it's particularly important in brush painting. I also wanted to move into doing some human objects, so I decided to do this little boat, and I also attempted my first structure. Now, once I felt slightly warmed up, I wanted to move into color.
I think I'm going to start out with something quite simple, which would be these water lily leaves.
We're gonna mix up a nice green and just kind of create a circular shape and the veins on the inside. Now, the book said to do this while it was wet, but that was a lie.
That's baloney.
And then I really wanted to try this branch bird scene. This was a really good one to start painting some birds because they will be included in some of my final pieces later as well. I just absolutely loved painting this one. Really loved the combination of very expressive lines and quite simple shapes. Then I thought I would move on to this wisteria piece. I did follow a tutorial, but I ended up changing it quite a bit.
You have freedom here. Freedom.
It's all up to the interpretation of the artist, and I wanted to use a more bluish purple. Then I wanted to do this lychee tree. It was at this point that I started discovering really that painting tree branches was one of my favorite things, for sure. I was one with the tree branches, what can I say? This one also did include a teapot. I'm not gonna lie, I really failed. I mean, you can still tell it's a teapot, or at least trying to be one, so at least there's that.
I don't know how to feel about that.
I also just really loved the colors in this one, the deeper blue greens and the kind of pinkish red. Then I tried to do a willow scene. To be totally honest with you, it did not go well. All practice is good practice. Even if it sucks, we're learning what not to do. So here is our progress for the day. It is day 3. So today I'm going to continue doing some of the tutorials in these books. Also, I do want to carve a stamp because in traditional Chinese painting, people would use stamps to sign them basically. I'm going to do my eraser carving method to make a stamp that I can use. I wanted to start off with a scene with a character. I started this piece off strong because I really liked this tree, but it kind of all went downhill from there, especially with the character, to be honest. He was looking rough, I'm not gonna lie. Oh no. There were a lot of really fun, cool elements to this piece, and I really liked a lot of the textures. Just ignore that. But I do feel like I kind of failed on it. I liked the colors and I liked elements of what I did, but the full composition at the end was definitely leaving a lot to be desired. So we started the day off quite rough.
We need to go back to the birds.
I moved on to doing a scene with birds and some vegetables, which honestly started really decent until I started painting the beak. Oh, the beak was just so bad. This is where it gets really tough because you can't really take anything back. No, this is so hard. There's not always that much you can do to fix it. Still gonna finish the full piece, but it was a rough start to day 3. So I thought, okay, let's go simpler. Let's paint some little fish. Now, these actually went pretty well. Everything about brush painting is very simple and purposeful. So it was a very big challenge for me. It was pretty much the opposite of what I usually do. We're really testing ourselves with this one. Then I moved on to do a flower scene with some branches. Branches, obviously my first love. of brush painting, probably because they're one of the easier things to paint, but anyway. I just absolutely loved working with this one. I think the colors were super, super pretty together. I think that's generally one of the things that I've really always loved about brush painting as well. The palettes for them are so unique and so beautiful. I absolutely loved how this one turned out. So I decided to continue with this, but do a flower in a boned style. I really, really loved the subtle color palette in this one. I just feel like all of the very light yellows and greens and browns just went so well together and created a really nice contrast that I feel like would be nice to carry into one of my own final pieces later. Another really important element of brush painting is that oftentimes you will see a little red seal mark somewhere that is used to kind of sign or finish off a piece and marks the piece with a level of cultural refinement. I'm going to be making one from an eraser. I decided that I wanted to sign my pieces off with the character for, you guessed it, Moon. Who's surprised?
I thought it was done. I realized I'm an idiot because when you stamp it, it is mirrored.
We gotta redo it. I'm always making more work for myself. I moved on to working on some lotus flowers. I made the leaves with green on most of the brush and then dipping the tip of the brush into black to get a really nice and interesting gradient. It's really so much like that one old commercial.
Now watch this. Ah, look at this color. Oh, okay. Calm down, Dee. Is this fun or what? Look at that.
I'm telling you, I felt exactly like that lady when I was doing this. This was a little bit different from the normal boned style ones because it used colored ink to do the outlines rather than black ink, which is, I would say, maybe a little bit more common. And then I moved on to do a fall scene. I absolutely love fall, so this was a super, super fun one for me to do, and I loved this color palette. Very light ochre, yellowy orange colors combined with the black ink, I think looked so lovely together. There's a little boat, which was super fun to paint as well. And I think I'm going to take a lot of inspiration for this one for one of my final pieces later as well. And then the last one that I wanted to do for the day is a winter scene, which were these winter berries covered in snow. So I just painted out the branch and then kind of grouped the berries as well as I could in different little clusters. The most important part is with the snow. That's what really brings the winter into the scene. I ended up using white acrylic paint for snow, and I'm just dotting it on the tops of the berries, the tops of the branches where it would have dusted. I really, really ended up loving the results of this day. I think it went very well. Even though it started off rough, we got to a better place in the end. Here we are on day 4. I want to do a little bit more winter scenery, and then the other thing that I want to do today is preparing some of the paper that I'm going to use for my final pieces. I'm going to be using this watercolor paper, and I do really want to do some tea dyeing, and maybe we'll start planning out kind of the composition and the things that I want to include in the final pieces as well. Let's get painting. I started with a snowy landscape. I quickly realized that a lot of winter scenes are about leaving areas blank to really suggest lots of snow. So this one was quite fun because it had mountains in the distance, also some little buildings and water as well. Then I moved in to try to get some teapot redemption. It was definitely tricky to get the shape right, but I do think in the end this one turned out way better and more like a teapot than the first one. There's also a branch with some white flowers kind of in the background and leading your eye through the page. I think very selectively using color for emphasis is something that is so lovely, so that's definitely something that I will keep in mind and carry into some of my final pieces.
All right, well, I looked around and this is what I've got, some fake flowers. And we'll see if I can make something cool. That's just from my own interpretation of this subject.
So I used a lot of techniques and drew from what I had done up to this point. I'm gonna be doing 4 different final pieces, one for each season. I love the different seasons. I even designed my autumn Ghibli miniature based on the seasons because I love it so much. In order to prepare for those final pieces, I am going to tea dye some watercolor paper to make it look a little bit more like traditional paper that is used for brush painting. The actual paper is very, very different, but we're using what we have. I've done tea dyeing loads of times. You all know this by now. Just some tea in a basin, put the paper in there to sit for a little while, hang it to dry, and then we get some really, really lovely aged looking paper. Then we can move on to work on this flower teapot. And I thought it was gonna be super, super hard, but this one was so much fun. I absolutely loved working with the color palette and just creating a lot of different shapes and interests, adding up layers to create some subtle shading, of course. I don't know if it really looked like brush painting necessarily, but I do like how it turned out. And so I was kind of having a little bit of a dilemma here because I really loved this flower section and I didn't know whether I should add a teapot, but I thought, you know what, let's try anyway. I'm still not sure if that was a mistake or not, to be honest. Did it turn out how I wanted it to? Not really, but was it terrible? Well, that's for you to decide, I suppose. At the end of the day, I did also do some additional paintings for a bonus video over on Patreon. So if anybody is interested in that, that will be over there. So here are our final results for day 4. Here we are on day 5. You may have thought that we did not accomplish all of our goals yesterday, but of course we did, my friends. Before I went to bed, I did sketch out some thumbnails of, I think, what would be cool for each of the seasons. One of the things that I thought would be nice to paint for one of the paintings is a crane. I think I'm definitely gonna have to try that today for sure. The past 2 days, I've really liked most of the stuff that I painted, so that's a good feeling leading us into our final days where we're gonna have to be a lot more confident to work on this paper. I really just painted this whole thing and thought that I pressed the record button and I didn't. For spring, I think I'm going to do a bird on a branch, so I wanted to test that in the position that I wanted it to be in and see if I could really get those shapes right and have it look the way that I wanted it to. I'm feeling a little bit more confident here. Another thing that I want to include in one of my final pieces is a bridge, so I thought I should try that out. From that, I also built out a landscape around that a little bit more just to kind of get used to doing that because I think I'm going to do something very similar in my winter piece. Another really important thing that I wanted to do is practice the characters for each season. With brush painting, most of the time, some kind of calligraphy will be included, whether that is poetry or a few words related to the piece. I'm keeping it quite simple and I'm just going to do each season, but I thought I should practice the characters and learn the stroke order. The only thing about the crane that I did, I kind of want the legs to be like... I also continued practicing and testing the composition with the crane because quite honestly, that was the one that I was the most worried about. It's so simple that you have to be so precise with each line that you make or it won't end up turning out how you want it to. This day was really the calm before the storm of starting our final pieces, which was so much pressure.
Absolutely no pressure. No pressure.
But we gotta move into day 6 anyway. Today, I think we're going to start our final paintings. I honestly don't know if I feel ready, but I probably never will. So I figured I would start with spring because I wanted to do a bird scene with tree branches and flowers. Spring is for the birds, I guess. For me on these final pieces, the most important thing was getting the composition right. We want it to be asymmetrical, but also still balanced. Since we're gonna have some colors going on, we still want our focus to be on the bird. So I wanted to make that a darker tone compared to the tree branches and also the flowers so that there's still emphasis on it while we have a lot of other colors bringing your eye down as well. Overall, I wanted this piece to have a very light, bright color palette. So we have pinks, greens, and grays. I also did some really, really subtle blue details as well, just to finish the piece off. The hard part is always deciding when it's done. I think that that's the most important thing in brush painting, but it's also one of the hardest things as well. And then to finish off the piece, we are going to, of course, write the season, which is spring, and stamp it with our little seal. The second piece that I decided to do on this day was winter. This one was more of a full
landscape piece. So there's gonna be some mountainous areas in the back, and I really just created those general shapes first with a very, very light wash. The composition of this one was very important as well. I wanted to really make sure that we had a balance going on and utilized negative space well. So I added a little bridge. I also added sections of trees. Now winter is a little bit tough because obviously a lot of trees don't keep leaves in the winter. I was almost going to put leaves on some of the trees and then I was like, no, it's winter. Over on our rocks, I did add some dry brush axe cut rock texture, and then I went over top adding in boned details. There is also a waterfall, which is the source of the water leading under the bridge. The space in between in the middle was looking quite blank, so I wanted to add a few different hill details. It's really a battle of the balance between having enough going on versus doing too much. You really need to leave a lot blank to keep that snowy feeling. I also added a figure on the bridge with an umbrella, kept it quite simple because I didn't want to mess up the figure. The final, maybe most fun part of all of this was getting to add some snow. This is really, really extra fun on this because of the tea-dyed paper, so it really brings out those white highlights. We're going to write winter at the top and also stamp our seal at the bottom. We did winter and spring. Now we just have to do summer and fall tomorrow.
It is day 7, our final day. Even though it is a little bit too hot to fully sit down and paint outside for a full day, usually before you start painting, you grind the inkstone, and that's kind of the time to really center yourself and just focus on what you're gonna paint. So I thought we would do that today and go outside, have a little bit of green tea, and experience some summer before we start our summer painting.
After I had absorbed all that summer, we're going to start with the summer painting. This was probably the piece that I was the most nervous about of all of them. It's probably why I put it off for the final day. I was really just worried about this crane. It was not particularly easy to paint, so I just did my absolute best. But I have to tell you, there were a couple of lines that did not go exactly where I wanted them to.
Shh, keep her secret.
I have regrets, but what can you do? Then I'm starting to add some lotus leaves. You knew they were gonna be in one of the final pieces. I'm doing another little gradient with mostly green on the brush and then dipping a little bit into blue to make some more interesting lotus leaves. In the background, we're going to have some bamboo. So I did 3 stalks and I wanted to keep them pretty subtle because I wanted most of the focus to be on the crane, even if it didn't turn out exactly how I wanted it to. The crane is standing in water. Of course, we need to do a little light wash. Most importantly, I do think the composition turned out pretty decent, which is maybe the most important part, like I said. And then as always, we have to add our summer character and stamp our piece as well. And then we can move on to our final piece, which was fall. Fall is my favorite season, but will this be my favorite piece? So in this one, I wanted to create kind of a faraway cove area that has some rocks and trees. There's a little fishing boat back there. I'm definitely nervous about these fish, but gotta do our best here. Okay, that was not good. This piece was a little bit similar to the winter one in that it was a lot about leaving space to suggest, in this case, a body of water. So I'm really just trying to shape the water as best as I can, using the details around it. In the bottom corner, I'm going to have 2 fish circling each other. Kind of reminds me of Avatar, to be honest. Maybe that's why I decided to do it. We also are gonna have a tree and some rocks in the foreground as well. This is mainly to try to balance the piece and just have your eye flow up the page. I wanted the foreground tree to be sort of more of a maple tree, so I did a kind of burgundy red color, using a lot of fall colors, lots of reds, orange, yellows. And at the end, of course, we are going to put our fall character on and also stamp it. Then all of our pieces were complete. I am going to be sending out one of these pieces as a postcard to the full tier over on Patreon. I'm gonna put it up to a vote. I think the postcards are super, super fun. The ones that I did last time, I think turned out really cool. I of course did little drawings on them and everything and wrote notes to everybody. I do send these internationally as well, so if you are anywhere in the world, I should be able to get one to you. I thought that this potentially could be a really fun set of prints, and I did do a test print of them, so let me know if this looks like something that some of you might be interested in. So let's take a look at our final seasonal pieces and also my favorite pieces that I did throughout the week. This was such a fun week of painting. I enjoyed it so much. I would say I am mostly happy with the results. There's lots to improve upon, of course, as always. And you know what? I think I dislike watercolor just a little bit less. Let me know what you thought, if you enjoy this style of painting, and maybe what your favorite piece was. The next miniature will be coming very soon. I am so excited to start working on it.